As our economy continues to crumble, and as our government prints money and institutes policies that could lead to further erosion of our money and our freedom, many people are gravely concerned about their future and the future of our country. Are these fears justified? We'll talk to finance expert Scott Minerd and see what he thinks next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part one of our interview with Scott Minerd, Chief Investment Officer of Guggenheim Partners. According to major industry sources, many state and local governments, especially California, should be considered insolvent. We asked Scott Minerd if he thought California was already lost.
I would disagree with the statement. I think the debts of the states are nowhere near the value of all the assets. And when I think of the assets of the state, I think not only of the human capital, right, which is the ability of the residents to pay the taxes and to the earnings and the economic capacity of the state, but I think of all their infrastructure. And the infrastructure of the states is massive. And at this point in the game, technical insolvency would be when the debts of the state were in excess of all the assets in a liquidation. If the state really had to liquidate its assets, that is, to sell the Capitol building in Sacramento in the case of California, or had to sell its highway system, then if the debts were in excess of all of those assets, plus its ability to service the debt, then I would say it was insolvent. But at this stage of the game, we're still not insolvent, though the margin of safety of solvency is declining rapidly.
With incomes falling and foreclosures increasing, property and sales tax revenues are also decreasing. The various government entities are scrambling to find new sources of revenue. Full Disclosure has been tracking the use of civic buildings and schools as collateral for loans and bonds. Mr. Minerd noted that the actual sale of the public assets has begun.
It's becoming a more important source of finances or financing for the states. Probably the most famous example out there is the Illinois Tollway, which was sold to a private equity consortium and then essentially leased back, or the revenues from the tolls were used to the benefit of the private owners. That was a very successful transaction for the state of Illinois as a way to raise money. And of course, the sale is not permanent. It's a 100-year sale. So over time, the tollway will be returned back to the citizens of Illinois. And there was a similar proposition in the state of Pennsylvania to sell the Pennsylvania Turnpike. However, the legislature there overturned the wishes of the governor to sell the Turnpike. But these assets in a lot of our major states, whether it's the turnpikes in states like Pennsylvania or New Jersey, which generate significant amount of revenues, in New York, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey owns the bridges and the tunnels, which are a significant source of revenue for the Port Authority. All of these things could be sold or done through a sale-leaseback as a way to get cash in the short run.
And so is that the answer that will help our local governments to get through our current economic plight? Is it the good idea to use short-term borrowing with non-voter approved bonds and the temporary sales of public assets until the economy improves? Scott Minerd explains the hazards in this kind of financing.
The problem here with this is it's just another form of borrowing money to cover current expenditures. If these assets were sold or monetized for the purpose of, let's say, making a large contribution to the state pension fund, or if these assets were sold, let's say, to make a contribution to a trust fund which could be used for other post-employment benefits, which are currently not funded at all by the municipalities, then that would be a very interesting option. But the ability to mortgage all these assets and then just use the proceeds to cover current operations really, is the equivalent of an individual mortgaging their home so they can pay their current bills. It might be a viable option if you're late in life and you don't have an expectation of having to meet the needs of another generation. But in the case of a state or a municipality, there is another generation behind us, and squandering these assets today to pay the bills is probably not a wise and prudent thing to be doing.
Is this kind of mortgaging widespread? How prevalent is this scheme, we ask him?
Well, there's a lot of interest in it, and it certainly is a very attractive option to governors and legislators around the country to fill the hole. Of course, so far there's not been much of a political will on the part of the legislature to do it, but I think in time, as states find themselves in more and more desperate situations with the economic downturn, that the appeal of monetizing these assets will increase, and it'll become a tempting source of revenues to plug holes. Now, in the state of California, there's a peculiar issue, which is we don't really have a lot of toll highways in the state of California, or a lot of user tax infrastructure. But that in and of itself represents an opportunity. The idea that the freeways in California could be converted into some sort of toll highways as a means to enhance revenues, I think is an attractive option for the legislature, and probably is something that at some point will have to be on the table and seriously considered.
Full Disclosure has learned that very few people know about the use of non-voter approved bonds, where schools and civic structures are being used as collateral for borrowing large sums of money. Do you think there's an obligation on government's part to inform the public of how they're doing this?
Oh, for sure. There's absolutely the obligation on the part of the elected officials to keep the public informed and to educate them. The problem is that for most of the people in any of the states, this is all a mystery. How the legislature manages to find a way to balance the budget seems to be a rather opaque process. Now, some of that, though, is really the result of the electorate themselves. The electorate has basically been ignorant of a lot of the issues that are being faced in the legislature. The amount of public intelligence or interest in how that process works is extremely low, and the legislature and the elected officials do very little to encourage it.
Why? Why don't our elected officials endeavor to keep the public informed about their financial wheeling and dealing? Why do they keep us in the dark, we ask him?
That is, I think, to the benefit of those who are in power. It gives them a lot more latitude to address the issues in the way that they find politically expedient for their own interest. And on top of that, it allows them to pick and choose the issues which they want the public to focus on. In the state of California, one of the issues which is extremely popular by some parts of the electorate is to focus on education. While we continue to promote the need to spend more money on education, and that we've linked the quality of education to the amount of money that's being spent on it, there's very little evidence to demonstrate that education quality and the amount of money spent per student has a direct correlation. And as a matter of fact, even worse, a lot of the money that is being used in education isn't going directly to the benefit of the students, but goes to special pet projects in each of the school districts, and is used to satisfy the needs of the unions and others, so that when it comes time for re-election, the person that is standing for re-election will have the support of their local teachers union, so that they can get re-elected. So it wouldn't be of a lot of benefit for that legislator who is relying upon that for re-election to spend a lot of time educating the populace on what the real issue is, and having an honest analysis and discussion about where we're spending the money and what it's being used for.